home. And Tremy, feel free to jump in. Why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my name is Tremy Anderson. I'm head of marketing for Vana High Security. So full disclosure, I'm in tech and I love it, but I have so much learning to catch up with you guys who are much more technical. So thank you so much for having me on the podcast and giving me that avenue to kind of learn and just kind of pick everyone's brain. So yeah, I just wanted to get that out there in case you guys think I'm a hacker. I am not.
Awesome. Well, welcome. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and open it up to Steve. Let me see. Let's go ahead and unmute Steve and take his video for him, so we can start our conversation. Steve. I'm not really sure. Video, Steve. Well, while Steve is getting his video and his audio going, I'll talk about the news that's going on out in the real world. They found another piece of malware attached to SolarWinds. It's like the fourth one so far that they've identified, which is really interesting. It just seems like they keep finding more and more pieces of SolarWinds and the attack behind it. I don't think we're anywhere near the end of it for sure. I think we have a lot more to discover. But it should be interesting how everything plays out. Yeah, so we're going to also look at an encoder for MSF Venom that helps encode payloads to try to get past different AVs and stuff like that. Shikado Ganai, it's been out there for a while. But even back in 2019, it was detected being used by APT20 to hide payloads. It all depends on the delivery and how many iterations, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Still waiting on Steve. I don't know if he's having problems there. Anyway.
Well, so tell me a little bit more about Shikata Ganai, because it's something that I recently learned about. It's not something that's being used frequently now, right? Because a lot of antivirus will pick it up, right? It'll be detected. So, so how's that being used today, I guess?
So the way that I've been using Shikata Ganai, as far as in the lab, I'll take an exe or some other code and inject it, and also encode it with Shikata Ganai, and then I do a lot of USB attacks, right? Like remote attacks where you have like something hosted on a web server or like AWS. And that's like going to be your PowerShell script, right? So there's ways to get around those controls, especially like if you're using PowerShell, and you can remotely execute something like that's encoded with Shikata Ganai. But there's all kinds of ways that you can do it Shikata. Really what you're doing with Shikata is just putting null bytes into the payload, which makes it really difficult to like pick up. Now there are like some payloads with Shikata with different iterations that you can absolutely get past AV without even having to worry about it. But that takes a little bit more finesse and a little bit more work to get it through. But for beginners, I mean, it's a good way to like experiment with encoding and experiment with MS Venom, creating your own malware, your own malicious payloads. So what I try to do on the podcast really is start at like a beginner level and kind of introduce people to the tools, give like a brief overview of what could be going on, and then give them a little bit of heads up. So I mean, it's a lot of fun, and if you create your own lab environment, it can be really good. Let's see. All right. For some reason, Steve is still having problems with his audio.
So you hear me, Mike?
Yes, absolutely, but I can't see you, Steve.
It says can't start video because host has stopped it. Unable to start video.
I will make Frenchie a host and he can mess with that. And we'll go ahead and start. So Steve, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you here. I think we actually have Ashley Pierre and Colin Hardy on the podcast as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
Our alumni. So tell us about yourself, Steve.
Yeah, sure. So, as you say, my name is Steve Watts. I'm currently the head of security operations at Aldermore Bank here in the UK. I've been in IT for around 20 years, and around 10 of that has been in cybersecurity, doing a number of different jobs, primarily in critical national infrastructure, also in the financial sector, the main kind of industries that I've worked through. Worked from early on help desks, worked all the way through, I guess, the normal route, as you'd probably say, coming through the technical support, help desk manager, going into kind of Windows and Intel infrastructure management, and then senior management in there, and then kind of got my first role in security, and went from there really. So I'll probably dig into some of that today and give you a bit of the background as to what that looked like if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one question I wanted to ask you. So I was listening to, there you are. Awesome. So I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts, right? With Colin Hardy and Ashley Pierre. And you had a very unique start when it came to security. So maybe like briefly touch on that, and then we can get into the more nuts and bolts.
Yeah, so I guess going way back as to how I first started, I think I got my hands on a computer really first time was in junior school. When I was really young, they had like Acorn computers, the terminal type computers. You could do like move the mouse or the cursor forward, back. So I was just really interested in that from there. Really, got on the computer as much as I could and did a little bit of basic programming, and it just kind of stuck with me really. So that was first introduction to it. And that just stayed at school. Really. I didn't have a computer at home or anything like that. I had a console. But one night I sat down and started watching a film called War Games that probably everyone on here is familiar with. If you're not, definitely go and check that out. It's an awesome film. But yeah, War Games basically got me into the whole hacking scene, into security, and set me up to be where I am now, really. So yeah, without going into all of the plot for it, there's a guy that's doing dial-up, doing a bit of war dialing in bulletin board systems. He basically breaks into NASA and loads of kind of fun and games after that. Won't spoil the plot, but I was overwhelmed by the fact that you could get on a computer, connect to one at the other side of the world, and really affect and potentially cause something like that. So that film just set me on that trajectory. I wanted to learn as much about it as I could, really. So managed to get my hands on it on a laptop. My parents bought me a laptop with a modem. Back in the day, there was no kind of internet like we have now, no Wi-Fi, just good old modems. So screeching away, dialing up onto various bulletin boards, buying computer magazines and looking for bulletin boards in the back of those, telephone numbers that could dial up. Came across some tools online to be able to do war dialing and see what, kind of, that was the Matthew Broderick, the War Games kind of influence then. It was, what can I see, what can I find? Found all of these hacking and underground type bulletin boards, and I was just like, wow, like where do I start? There's just so much stuff to get my teeth into. There was how to access systems, how to program, all sorts of things. And I just really didn't know where to start. I just jumped in and having as many conversations with people on bulletin boards, getting to know people, getting into the community, and just swapping tips and ideas and tricks, learning about computers and just looking at the security side of things, really. And then I think back in the bulletin board days, it was pretty difficult not to come across things like phone phreaking. I was started reading things like 2600, Cult of the Dead Cow, Legions, all those types of kind of publications, if you like. And I was just bowled over by how interesting it was and what you could do to manipulate these systems and use them. So yeah, just learning as much as I could, really. Again, VAX and VMS was quite big back in the day. So there was loads of tools online for VAX, VMS, loads of default passwords and things. So just really absorbing as much of that as I could, I guess, was really where I started. And that was, I think it was maybe just before I'd started school. That was high school. That was so. Yeah, that's how I got into the scene, I guess, really.
That's really interesting. You mentioned BBSs and war dialing. So when I first became a pen tester, a lot of the work we did, war dialing on different devices and different networks. It brings back memories of the old days. So did you start like your legitimate security career as blue team or red team?
So it's a bit of a strange one. So the bit they've not covered off really was that when I moved from bulletin boards, so the internet became a little bit more mainstream and I got access to the internet. My whole again, the world was just opened up to all the different forums that were online on the internet. So started doing various things on there, playing around, getting interested in malware, downloading malware samples and testing things, breaking my machine. The amount of times I had to kind of re-image my machine from doing things wrong was unreal. But just really getting my hands on as much things as I could. And I had a couple of friends that were also interested in security and in IT. We had the same classes at school, IT classes. So we'd try and, hack each other or get each other's passwords, give each other permission, obviously, to do that. We'd send each other, like NetBus was quite big back in the day, NetBus Trojan. So, it was packaged up as a whack-a-mole game. So we were like sending it to our friend and saying, try out this game, see if we get like a high score on it, and drop us an email back and tell us what score you got. Because back in the day then, when Hotmail was actually HTML, Hotmail, that's where the name comes from if you didn't know, but it actually came back with your source IP address, your home IP address on the email. So you could quite easily take that IP address, put that into NetBus and connect to that person that had run the whack-a-mole game. So we had some good fun with a couple of our friends, kind of opening their CD drawer and sending them to websites, all that sort of fun stuff. But just really, really curious. No maliciousness to it. But I guess the interesting thing for me was just seeing what was out there. So I started, scanning and seeing all of these internet IP addresses that were open and that were infected with all these different things. So doing a lot of scanning. And anyway, cut a long story short, one day I came home from school and my dad kind of sat me down and he said, I think we need to have a chat. And I was like, okay, this doesn't sound too good. What's this about? And my ISP had basically sent him a letter saying that we've seen this activity, coming from your machine, please like cease and desist, basically, before we take it any further. And my dad sat me down. He's really calm. I take after my dad quite a bit in terms of he doesn't like he always likes challenges and things like that. So he really knew that I wanted to carry on doing this. But he said to me, look, you're obviously good at this, but you can't be doing this, but you can't get in trouble. I was like, well, I don't want to stop doing it because I absolutely love it. So I need to find another way to kind of do this. So that's kind of what led me down to the blue team side of things, if you like. Got me really interested in what you could do to stop this type of activity from happening, how you stop yourself from getting infected, and kind of change my whole approach to what I was thinking about security and went more on the defensive side. But to answer your question, my first role was in security architect, so building secure systems, so very much kind of from the protective side. It wasn't until a little bit further into my career that the company I was working for, they were outsourcing the pen testing, and I wanted to really be able to help with, cut some of the cost of pen testing, but also develop myself as well. So I went and got qualified as an ethical hacker, and kind of used my red team skills in the business then, really. But the majority of my career has been blue. Yeah, it's been on the protection, putting in secure systems, and then on the response side, kind of responding to any incidents, that sort of thing.
So I have a question. I see lots of organizations really focusing on blue team, right? Because our company does penetration testing. And it's a challenge for me, to educate why an organization needs a pen test, because a lot of times they'll just invest a lot of money on the blue side. So I'm curious to understand more about the dynamic. And you seem very well-rounded, where you're an ethical hacker and you're on the defensive side. So what's the dynamic like between the two sides? Do you guys work well together? I know there's purple teaming, but how does that all kind of come together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think in terms of companies throwing a lot of resource and money and energy at blue, I think there's, and many people have said this, I know you've had Greg Vandergast on as well, Mike, and a big kind of person calling out the fact that instead of doing all of the reaction, really we need to be kind of shifting left, if you like, down the kill chain and doing protection, protect these systems in the first place, so that there's not as much things for blue teams to actually have to respond to. So I think you will definitely always need blue teams and your security operations. They will always be there, and humans as well. And we'll probably get onto that. We talked a little bit about that on last night on chat about automation. But yeah, blue team. But definitely try and fix your problems downstream. Stop those need for a reaction. But there always will be one. You need to assume breach. So you need your blue team, but then you also need your red teams to come in and test those things and try and, as best they can, put that threat actor hat on and try and test and not just pen testing is one thing, and everyone will be doing pen testing, but it's also doing your pen testing whilst working with your blue team. So not just we're going to go and test this web server over here, and then a report comes over, people read it. You also want to be including your blue team to see how they're reacting to that, make sure they've got the right log set up, so that if that attack does occur, that in a test scenario that you're going to get the right signals through, that you're going to get all the information through, so that if that does occur for real, that you're prepped and you're set up as a blue team. And the combination, as you said, Trami, that the purple team in the middle is super important. That dynamic needs to be that they just both work to make each other better. A red teamer is going to make it more difficult for a blue teamer, and then they're going to share those TTPs, and the blue team is going to get better. The blue team is going to use all of their skills to be able to stop that red team, and therefore the red team are going to have more of a challenge, and they're going to be pushed and kind of stretched to do certain things. So it's I won't say it's a love hate, because everyone loves each
push
other,
and
right?
pull.
But it's definitely feeding off each other, and just for me, it's just sharing that knowledge, and it's not different sides of the fence. It's just different approaches to the same problem for me.
It's really interesting too, because we talk about red team and blue team quite a bit, but I come from the mindset that when it comes to building an organization, I want my people to know both sides. I want them to be able to compromise the system so that they can really understand what's going on the defensive side, if that's their job, being defense. But the mindsets are different too. We talked about that a little bit last night, as far as what makes the blue team and what comprises the red team psychology. But yeah, that's it's a really good point. It's a good conversation to have. Maybe we can get into that in a little bit. So with building your teams, what do you look for in a candidate? Let's say you have somebody trying to get into the industry, and you want to give them an opportunity. What are some of the key points that you look for that makes somebody more attractive, as far as a red team or blue team or any team, really? What kind of traits do you look for individually in a person?
So it's really good timing, actually, because I've just signed up to a mentor site. I've just taken on some mentorees. I've got a couple now that feel quite grateful to be able to start giving back to the industry. And you get asked those questions. How do I get into cybersecurity? What's somebody looking for? How do I get into cybersecurity when I don't have any experience? If I'm fresh out of school, people are saying, I'm seeing jobs that say 5 years worth of experience or these certifications. How do people expect us to get into the industry when we can't because you've blocked us straight away? And these are really clever people, right? These are people that need to be in our industry. They're really passionate. So it is very difficult from that perspective. And as a mentor, I guess what I say to people is, well, the first questions, and I blogged on this recently, actually, on how to break into the industry. The questions I ask to people as a mentor, and also the similar questions when I interview is, what is it that makes you want to enter this industry? Why this industry over any other, really? Because for me, really, I'm looking for somebody that's passionate. You can get some people that aren't necessarily passionate and live and breathe this stuff, but they're really good at the job. So you wouldn't use that to rule it out. But certainly somebody being passionate and getting that sense that they really are interested in the role is a big thing for me, really. And just willingness to learn, I think. Understand, loving puzzles and challenges, because that's literally what our job is. Whether you're defending, whether you're attacking, it's a puzzle, it's a challenge, and every single day is different. And that's what attracts most people, I think, to this role, is that you go into work in the morning, and the day that you have is not going to be the same as any other day you've had. There'll be something that's slightly different. There'll be a new news story that you need to look at, and all those sorts of things. It's an ever evolving thing. So yeah, passion, inquisitiveness, and determination. And it's more really about the mindset. I don't necessarily look for somebody that's had 10, 20 years worth of experience in the industry. And some of the best people I've seen come into organizations have had very little, if any, IT or cyber security experience, but they've come from backgrounds where their mindset is military, for example. You'll know yourself, Mike. Military people are very mission orientated, goal focused. They adapt, they overcome, they see a problem, over it, under it, round it, through it, whatever it is. It's that type of mentality that I think is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I look for when I interview candidates as well is creativity, right? So it's not so much knowing how to penetrate a system or knowing which exploits to use. For me, it's more of the thought pattern and how creative they are. I don't expect everybody to know everything. And one thing that irritates me, especially in the industry, is we have a tendency to do these interviews with like a panel of people, right? So there's like 5 or 6 people in a room, and it's one candidate, and they're getting hammered from every side. And
I
these
hate
are
those panel interviews.
it's horrible, because it's like you have 5
You're
people.
nervous enough going into an interview, and then it's like you're being judged by like a panel of 5 people that are comfortable in their chairs.
Exactly, and everybody has a different level of expertise in different areas. So you walk into this gauntlet of people, and each one has their own specialties, but they expect you to know all of the specialties, as a candidate. And I think that turns candidates away pretty quick. And I think another problem we have in the industry as far as like hiring and positions is we're not promoting from within. We have, jobs that open up in a mid-level. And so you see these jobs on the internet for people with 5 years experience. Why not move one of your other people up into that role and open a door for someone new in security? By not doing that, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice and actually limiting our capabilities as an industry. But that's my opinion. I think that there's ways that we can, maneuver this whole idea of a shortage of talent. I don't think there's a shortage of talent. I think it's really just mismanagement of requisitions and people. Which brings me to,
I think there's like that qualitative side and the quantitative side, right? So from like what you guys are saying, you're looking for someone with passion, creativity. Those are things that is hard for like a job recruiter to quantify, right? So if I'm an HR person, I'm just looking at numbers, stats. Everyone is just a number and stat. And I think that's the problem. But how do you guys even suggest addressing or fixing that, because you're trying to scale. There's all these jobs opening, and a recruiter only knows so much. So they're just looking at numbers, certifications, like it's all just numbers. And you guys are saying the most valuable people are the ones that have all these kind of intangible things, like the creativity, the passion, things that it's so hard to measure on a resume.
So the key thing missing out of that process is people. And I think Steve can, cover that people aspect of it, because we talked a little bit about it last night. But I think he agrees, and kind of like we speak from the same platform about how important people are. So why don't you give us your view of people in the industry?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a big subject, but I always say it starts with the people. You know, the only reason we've got jobs in this industry is because people want to do things that, you know, to break into systems. It's all people driven. You know, that we're solving a people problem. You know, people are the problem because they're the one that, you know, trying to conduct the attacks, and it's people that are going to come back and respond to them. So um, it's a difficult question to answer in terms of the hiring, because you are right, Tommy. How do you, it is intangible. It's not like, and this is why I think a lot of people get stuck up or hung up on, you need to be a CISP, you need to be a OSCP, you need X, Y, and Z, because they automatically use that level to say, but that person must be good at doing that thing, so therefore they are going to be of use to me in the organization. And I think there is some element of that, there is some element of truth to that. But again, if you just purely basing your hiring off those kind of that criteria, you're just going to miss so many amazing people out there. You just do a disservice to yourself and the industry. So I think it very much is, you have to work with your HR teams to try and get that across to them. And I've worked with some really good HR and recruitment teams before where I've said, look, you know, we can't be driven by certifications and experience. I need somebody that can come along and you know, is a problem solver, is creative, like you say, Mike. And you're not really going to know that until you get those people in front of you, and you start, you know, picking them up, not apart really, but, you know, just asking the
Mold
questions.
them.
Yeah, seeing how they think, and, you know, give them a question, see how they respond to it, all that sort of thing. Just really get to know them, I think, is the main thing. And because it is our industry, I say it over and over, it's about the people. It's not about the technology. It's all about the people, really. You know, we need to look after our people, and we need to make sure we're getting the right people for the job, and not pigeonholing people as well.
And that,
Awesome.
that brings up a good point too about learning people and getting to know people as people and not employees. Because the biggest problem that companies have with compromises and breaches is insider threat, right? So if you don't get to know who your people are, and they don't have some sort of connection with you as a person, and you're not interested in their life outside of work, and you don't encourage them to, you know, do the things that they have a passion for,
Mhm.
you're potentially building that insider threat. And some of those companies, it's very dangerous to do that. So I always tell people in companies, you know, if you don't know the guy sitting in front of, like, let's say an IDS or monitoring your network, if you don't know what his passions are, you don't know what he does outside of work, or you know, the things he enjoys doing other than work, then you're failing, because
Mhm.
he's a person, not an employee. You know, and that needs to be embraced. And I think that kind of culture will kill that whole insider threat issue, unless it's like a targeted APT.
Mhm. No, totally agree. Yeah, for me, it's I've always said it's about people and relationships and networks and understanding the people, understand what makes them tick. Want to make sure that, you know, that they're happy. You know, the industry that we're in is a very stressful one. You know, there's lots of stressful industries, but, you know, speaking specifically to this one, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of long hours, all those types of things. And, you know, we owe it to our staff to basically always be looking out for them, you know, checking in with them, understanding what works for them, understanding how they work, and really nurturing people. And yeah, if you do that, the knock-on benefits are exactly as you say there, Mike. You know, you get a happy workforce. You know, that kind of takes that from the table, you know, in that instance. And it's just, it just makes so much sense. You get more productivity out of the person, they're happier. You're going to retain those people as well. They're not going to go elsewhere and take all that knowledge, you know, with them that you've built up over institutional knowledge over years and years. You know, going back to your point before, we do need to be recruiting internally, because those people have built up all of that knowledge. They've all of the network and relationships that they've built up over time that makes them a good person to have. We want to move them around and encourage, you know, them staying within the company for all those reasons.
Absolutely. You know, it
What's your
seems
favorite interview question that you ask, to understand, you know, how someone thinks and if they're a good fit? What's your favorite interview question? And I want to hear one from Steve and one from Mike, because Mike, I know you're looking for creativity. Steve, you're looking for that passion, that drive, and how they tinker with something, right? So, what's your
Yeah.
favorite interview question?
Do you want me to go first, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the questions I like asking is like kind of what's caught your eye in the industry this week? You know, I just nice open question, you know, and at the moment, SolarWinds should probably be the top of most people's list, I imagine. So it for me, then it's really about saying, what do you know about that particular incident? How has it played out? And just really leave it down to them to explain back to me what they think, and then maybe throw a few questions in there. As if you were a blue teamer, what would you be thinking? As soon as you hear that story break, what would be going through your mind? What would you be thinking? And just really seeing how that plays out, and then seeing how that fits with the type of person that I need within my team, really. So yeah, just let them come back to me, a pretty open question, and just let them run away with it, I guess. Yeah.
Nice.
So my favorite question that I've personally been asked was back in 2005. I flew up to Redmond, Washington, to Microsoft, and I was interviewing for a kind of like a program manager for code scrubbers. Right? They would scrub the code, and they bring the code to me and say, "Hey, these are the issues. Do you want to release it or not?" So I was expecting this really technical interview and just grueling interview because it was a day long. But the most interesting question I was asked was, I was sitting in a really cluttered small office at Microsoft campus, and a lady walks in and she's sitting there and she goes, "Okay, our interview is going to be really short. I just have one question to ask." She said, "There's an object in this room I'm thinking about. It's your job to figure out what that item is by asking the least amount of questions." And I
Wow.
thought, okay, well, this is different. So yeah, I mean, those type of things, just trying to see where the people are, how they think, how they deduce, issues or problems. Um, but one of the other things I like to ask potential candidates as well is, you know, I want to know not the book level. I don't want to know, if you have a certification, it's great. I respect that. But I want to know, if I was to give you, system A, and these are the vulnerabilities listed, what would you do? There's no right or wrong answer. Just tell me how you'd flow through that system, or what you would look at first, um, just to see their thought patterns. And then of course I always ask, my token question at the end of the interview is, are you involved in any kind of art, whether it be music, painting, drawing? Because I find those people are usually some of the best analysts, because they look at things a different way. And they're not, they don't look black and white. They're kind of like, very creative, and they give you more of a holistic picture, rather than, this is what's popping across the IDS or whatever. So yeah, so those are my favorite questions. Now I do know that, Steve, you have a background in martial arts as well, right?
I do, yeah. I've done martial arts since I was, again, probably around the same time, since I was really young. I got into it, probably when I was around 11 or 12, something like that. And I've done it on and off since then, really. But yeah, I've done Thai boxing and kickboxing for over 7 years. So that's my art, I guess. I'm not musical or anything like that, but yeah, certainly the martial art is.
And that seems to be, yeah, that seems to be kind of a theme across the security industry, right? So I know at least 2 or 3 people that are involved in martial arts or some type of MMA, right? Jeremiah Grossman, who started White Hat, is really into MMA. Like that's his thing. But I think that, again, is that calculated, strategic kind of view, and that combat sport kind of pushes things, and that kind of opens up another question too, as far as like red team, blue team. So I know with red team, we have sort of, the reaction once you get into a system, your body reacts a certain way. The biofeedback is pretty amazing. And I did a thing out in Sandia National Labs called Tularosa, Project Tularosa. So at the time I was staying with my parents, and I got a call, an email saying, "Hey, look, Sandia National Labs wants, you to come out and do this project." And I get the contract, and most of it was redacted. I couldn't figure out, what I was really doing. But I went out there and they hooked me up to all different kinds of sensors and stuff, and had us break into like this mock SCADA network. And the whole purpose was to kind of measure and look at the biometric feedback, blood pressure, eye movement from the camera, keystroke logging, heart rhythm. I had to wear a little bracelet that had a monitor on it. So it's really interesting. And I come to find out, after that whole experiment, looking at the project summary was that when red teamers or hackers get into a system, the chemicals that are released in the body's reaction is a lot like that of narcotics. So I think a lot of people, we talked about this last night. Like if someone told me I couldn't hack into a machine, that I was no longer allowed to have a lab and do exploits and exploit development, I think I would lose my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's addictive. So from a
Mm-hmm.
blue team point of view, there has to be a high level of stress that goes with that. Because with an attacker, we just have to be right once. But with
Mm-hmm.
blue team, they have to be right all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of points there. I think for me that the whole martial arts, cybersecurity, blue team, it's all about the challenge for me. You're pitting yourself against somebody else. They've got a certain set of skills. They want to do something. You want to do something else, and it's that whole kind of game of chess in the ring, in the same ways as behind the keyboard. They want a different outcome from this particular engagement than you, basically, right? So it's who's going to come out on top, who's going to win, basically. And I think that's the driver for why I do Thai boxing. It's to test myself. It's to push myself, and yeah, likewise with security, it's always about that that challenge and finding ways to do things and trying to outsmart or outwit other people. I guess that's ultimately what it comes down to. But in terms of the question around stress, you're absolutely, for the blue team, that's goes back to what I was saying before. It can be such a stressful role to be in, because it's always changing. There's always different things that you need to learn, and there's always different technologies every week. Containerization's coming along, and then you've got all of these different various different technologies, and you've got to, it sometimes can be difficult to understand all of those technologies and the security implications that they have, right? Because you've got teams that are specialists in all of those things. You've got cloud specialists, you've got DevOps specialists, you've got all these different, and they look at that. We have to be able to look at it right across the piece and understand it to the degree where we can do our job. So this constant cycle of having to keep up to date, not just in the security industry, but in technology in general, can be a challenge, can be very difficult. And so there's also that element to it. But yeah, absolutely. I've coined something called FOGO. So we've got fear of missing out. We've got like fear of getting owned, and that's what it is for me. It's like everybody who works in the blue team is there to stop something like that from happening. So you always, if me for example, I'm always checking Twitter, I'm always checking the news feeds, my phone blows up. So because you want to make sure that you're always as ahead of the curve as much as you can be, you always got the best opportunity to do your job well. So you really have to stay on top of that. You really have to check yourself quite often to make sure it's not running away with you, because especially if, like you said before, Mike, you're really passionate about this stuff, it's hard to pull your head out of it and just give yourself some time. You need to be able to check yourself and make sure that you're not getting too stressed out, that you're not going to get burnt out and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's why I think mental health in the security industry at the moment is one of the big things that everybody talks about, because yeah, if it's left unchecked, it can be very bad. So
yeah, that brings up a good point too with the mental health. I mean, I just recently lost a friend of mine in Texas that was in the industry. And I just talked to him right after Christmas, and then I got a message from one of his coworkers that he had passed. And we see that across the industry. Like it's a real problem because it is a fast-paced industry, and there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to keep up with the technology, a lot of pressure to keep up with the exploits, and it's a lot of work. And some people don't have that outlet or don't know what to do with it. So there's a huge push in the industry right now for mental health. In our Discord server, we actually have a channel just for mental health.
yeah, it's
People are
really good,
struggling,
that.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing too, I know I introduced you to one of our mutual contacts to talk about maybe helping kids. So that's something that I'm pretty passionate about when it comes to kids who are like problematic and probably going to go down the wrong path.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of work with them and the Met Police in London. So tell me your view on, what's your passion with that, and how the capacity you want to get involved with helping, kids come into the industry and really learn and grow with what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, given what you said about my background, I could have quite easily gone down a different way. There was that intervention from the ISP, I guess, if you like. If it hadn't for that, who knows? So I think I've just been really lucky that happened to me, and I always kind of promised myself that I'd pay that back, if you like. So always looking for different opportunities to speak to not just young children, but obviously they're the main people that get into it, but there's other people in this industry that just decide, what, I'm just going to go down this path. So anyone that will listen, basically I'll try and talk to them and let them know that there's other ways to put their creativity and their curiosity to good use without having to risk going down that path, really. So I've done a number of talks for schools and introduce people to the different types of teams that they could get into, whether it's red team, blue team. There's really that many teams that somebody can get into it. So it's really making it attractive for them, and showing them why staying legal and commercial and if you like, going down that route is a better option than the other path. So yeah, really passionate about that, and just make sure that they put their creativity and everything to good use.
Yeah. So Trammy, a question for you, and you can follow this up as well, Steve. Ideal job, your dream job in cybersecurity. Go.
I feel like I'm in my dream job in cybersecurity. I love being on the offensive side. I love like just working with the hackers. Because I learned so much, right? I don't need to know all the details, all the attacks and exploits, but for me, it's just super interesting because I use the internet. I have seen, the internet grow and how we're so tethered to technology or phones and different screens. So for me, it's almost like naive to neglect where it's going. And security is such an important thing. So I feel like this is my dream job because I get to use my creativity, my graphic skills, my marketing, and help tell a story in the industry that is so gloomy and and dark. I feel like I can kind of I get to come from like a positive space, like, hey, yes, there are bad actors out there. So how can we help people protect themselves? And penetration testing is one of them. So I kind of like the contrast because I'm just really bubbly and nice, but it's cool that I get to work on the offensive side and kind of like learn all how to like switch gears and get into the mindset of like a threat actor, right? So I love that. I feel like I'm in my dream job right now.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think very similar to Trammy, to be fair. I'd say that it's where I am now, and not just from a career perspective, but just I mean where I am with the ability to be able to give back. I've had a career path and a plan of where I wanted to get to, and that has really taken me to where I am now, to the point where I can now do other things. I can, do the mentoring. I can do these podcasts that I haven't done previously, and start to really give back. I'm lucky that my role allows me to do that, and specifically to the role, I love the fact that I've got the hands-on technical side of things because I love being technical, I love being in the weeds. But I also get to manage people as well, because it's, as I say, it's about the people. So it's great to be able to manage people and help them to grow and learn and also learn from them myself as well. So yeah, hands-on, I can do the strategy side of things. So really bits from all over. And then I get to, I'd say, go home, but I'm always at home now, unfortunately, because of COVID. But I get to log off from work and then come on and do things like this, and hope to give stuff back to people as well. So yeah, for me, just in a generally a good place from that perspective, that work is the role that I've always wanted, and I've got all this other stuff that I can do as well. So
yeah, absolutely. The dream job that I would have, I think, is this podcast. Really, it's given me an outlet and a platform to speak from and really work with people. So we have an 11-year-old sometimes that comes onto the podcast and hangs out with us in Discord. Really sharp kid. I've talked about him a million times. It's amazing. Um, but to see that level of knowledge and advanced skill set at such an early age is shocking. And it goes back to what Trammy said about, the internet technology's come so far. I mean, when you look at a cell phone, if it's in the palm of your hand, and it literally has more computing power than the first supercomputer. So it's both, like a really exciting time, but it's also a really scary time if it's not handled correctly. Um,
For
Mhm.
sure.
so yeah, like any other questions that you may have, Trammy? I'm going to open up the chat here in a second. Same rules apply as always. No disrespect, no whatever. Please act professional in the chat, and we'll go from there.
There's Ryan. Hey, mate.
Hello. Hey, man. How you doing?
How's it
Yeah,
going,
good, thanks.
Ryan?
How you going, Tremmy? What's
Ryan's
happening?
always living the dream over there.
He's got the dream job there.
For
Yep.
sure. For sure.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the view. Okay,
You
so
know
I've
what?
got a question. Can I
Yeah.
jump in with a question? It's
Yeah.
from Fiona. She's got a bit of a bad connection, but it's there's been so many references to ethical hacking. Given the ethical landscape is constantly shifting in response to social dynamics, what does this term mean to you, and how do we keep the ethical dialogue open and alive so as to maintain a process of self-reflection and accountability?
Wow,
Gee.
awesome question. So, assuming that one was for me, I'll take a stab at that. I
That's
think
you, man.
for me, yeah. Okay, cool. So, I think it is difficult. I think you've got the legal side of things that changes, and we've seen people get kind of arrested for bug bounty type stuff. So they think they're being ethical, and to them they're not doing anything malicious, and then suddenly before they know it, they've got people kicking the door down and arresting them. So I think it's really difficult from that perspective. And I think also, and we had a little bit of a chat about this in the Discord last night as well. It's difficult to be if you're an ethical hacker, then you already on the back foot, because the real threat actors aren't ethical. Okay, the people are attacking hospitals, with ransomware and these fatalities, or people using COVID to send phishing emails to say that they come within such distance and they could be infected. There's just you're not going to. An ethical hacker, the fact that they're ethical, are not going to do those things. So you're already struggling to recreate that attacker's mindset, the attacker's TTPs, because you're boxed. So I think, yeah, it's very difficult to kind of simulate that attacker and be ethical at the same time. And when you are being ethical, when people are getting arrested for it, it's very kind of grey area. So yeah, great question. I'm not sure I have a perfect answer for it, but yeah, definitely need to keep more of an eye on the landscape and the legislation. Yeah, just keep yourself safe, I guess, while you're doing it. And a lot of the things like the bug bounties, and a lot of companies now issue what you can and can't do. So definitely pay attention to those. If you're trying to go for a system to do a bug bounty and you've not got those guidelines, I'd say move on and go elsewhere, so that you've at least got some legal cover before you do that, and you don't get somebody knocking on your door.
Right. Absolutely.
How do you cement in those guidelines? Like, how do you know they're legit? Like, is there a process you go through to, basically make sure you're on the right side of the law? Or
so from a pen test perspective, from the ethical hacker pen testing perspective, if you're going to go and do that for another company, then you'll generally get what you can and can't do. In this test you can't do any DDoS. In this test you can't drop any tables if you pop a SQL server. You can't X, Y, and Z, basically. So it's very it should be quite tight from a legal contract perspective as a pen tester and a red team on your engagement. So absolutely, if you are doing that, the company that you're working for needs to be looking after you and making sure that those terms are very clear in there. And if they're not clear, then you need to make them clear, or stay away from that particular thing that you want to do. Yeah, it's generally down to a contract for I guess a pen tester or a red teamer.
Yeah, it's defining that scope for that assessment, right? So
Yeah.
for me, ethical is I'm gonna talk to you about what I'm going to do so that you know what to expect. So there's that transparency. Where it falls into the unethical is if you're doing something behind my back that we didn't talk about, right?
Yeah.
So,
So
and
Brett,
then
you
there's
go,
a good,
like, go.
there's a good story about that, right? About scope and scope creep, and doing things that are like questionably like unethical. A couple friends of mine from Coalfire got arrested last year during a pen test when they carried out a physical assessment on a courthouse. Well, the court didn't clarify things with the local police, and there was a mix up in communication. So they compromised this building in the middle of the night and got arrested for getting into the building. So that's another thing too. Like contracts are really important when it comes to understanding, the scope, because the scope may be very defined, but if other parties that may not be privy to those, don't get that information, it could be really sticky. So for Steve, I got a question from Mohammed. What's been one of your biggest achievements that you're proud of?
I think kind of going back to what we were saying before about where I am now, being able to do the mentorship, having the confidence in myself to know that I can talk about these things and pass that knowledge on to other people. I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of, and being able to talk to the children in the schools, and you're never going to know, I guess, whether or not you've stopped somebody from doing that. You can only hope, but the fact that you're there saying it is something, and possibly something else as well. I know you've only asked for one, I'll give you two. The other thing is I do a lot of open source intelligence search parties, and I've blogged about that they're on my blog, and really proud of the fact that I've got the kind of skills to be able to do that, and I know the people that can join me on those teams to be able to do those open source intelligence search parties. And for those that don't know what that is, definitely go and have a look at Trace Labs. Fantastic team of people out there. There's Ryan. I know Ryan's all over with Trace Labs, but they basically have captured a flag type contest, but with this there's a bit more seriousness to it. So basically what will happen is you'll join the open search party, and you're basically given real missing persons cases. I think there's varies, but normally around 10 missing people missing people from the law enforcement officers, and your job is basically to use open source, use the internet, use Google, use any kind of tool at your disposal legally, within some guidelines. Going back to what we say, they issue some guidelines of what you can and can't do. Very important. And your task basically is to see if you can find any information that may be able to help locate that person for the family of the person that's gone missing. So you going, Ryan?
So have you ever experienced any vicarious trauma from your experience with OSINT? Like, I know that myself personally, I discovered a suicide note that was hidden on a gaming server. Have you come across this, and how have you dealt with that? How have you worked through that process?
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't come across something like that, just the fact that this person is missing, and you see who the family are, you're looking through news stories, you're looking on the Facebook page, and you're seeing the last thing that they posted, things like that. It's hard going. It really is a kind of when I jump into those, and again, I've got this, I've blogged on this, but I throw my headphones on, don't let anybody come into the room that I'm in, and just kind of zone into it. And then at the end of it, I take my headphones off, and you're just absolutely exhausted, just mentally drained. You need to go and decompress and do something fun, whatever it is, because I have come across things like that where, there's been, you found out that the person, unfortunately, is not alive anymore, or even just sometimes it's the unknown. You don't know whether or not this evidence. So as part of the search party, you submit the evidence to the evidence board, and then that's collected by the Trace Labs team, and then taken on to law enforcement for them to take that action, hopefully actionable intelligence, and help them to aid their investigation. So even if you don't come across something like that and there's no closure on it, for me, sometimes it's the not knowing, is what I've done, what I've done something. But I tend to just spin that back as positively as I can and say, look, I don't know, but let's just say it has. Let's just say that what I've just spent that 4, 5, 6 hours doing, that one piece of information that I found or my team found and put forward could make the difference to somebody's life. So I think, back to Mohammed's question, awesome question, that, thank you. That's probably up there with some of the things I'm proud of the most, I think.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Next question. What is your favorite blue team tool?
Team to I mean, there's too many to name, I guess. But one of the things that interesting question that poses, though, is that I've been thinking about is how many of the tools that we use now take us away from the fundamentals. You get a blinky box or a tool and you go and install it and people and your team's running it, but don't necessarily understand the underlines of it. So I think that's an interesting one for me. We kind of what's the best term to use? Kind of taking away the technical elements and wrapping them in tools. And we talked about this a little bit last night, I think, Mike, with AI and ML and all that sort of thing. I think we just need to be careful with these tools that we don't just point, click, and hope that the system's going to tell us that when something bad happens. I think we put a bit too much faith into those.
Yeah, so that also opens up another discussion about people and relationships, right? So I think with the dawning of this buzzword AI, we're kind of putting ourselves at a disservice because we're expecting a system to think for us and be able to detect behavior, which I have a real problem with because I've seen some of those tools work, and I've ran some pretty bad actions against systems, and they haven't picked it up because if a network is already hosed with bad traffic and bad actors, and you put AI into it, or machine learning, it's going to learn that behavior is normal because that behavior existed before you put that box in. And I try to tell clients that if you want AI, you really have to do some forensics and some threat hunting, or you're wasting your time and your money, really.
Yeah, you need that good baseline to go from. That exactly like you say, Mike. You need to make sure that you're in a good place before something goes in like that, because otherwise, garbage in, garbage out, really, isn't it? So.
Yeah, same thing with logs too. So next question, being from the UK, what do you think needs to change to help the security industry become more prevailing and show organizations, people, security needs to be taken seriously?
I think so. In terms of security being taken seriously, I think the media is doing a good job of that for us. I think just the size of some of the incidents that are taking place at the moment, boards can't ignore that. It's mainstream media. It's there. The people are picking it up in the newspapers. They're watching it in the morning, having their coffee. You can't really escape it. So most companies now will be looking at that, and the good boards, good companies are coming back into the business and saying, what are we doing about SolarWinds? What are we doing about ransomware now? They're having these types of conversations that just weren't had by boards, many years ago. So I think that in itself, the industry and how mainstream cybersecurity is, hacking, compromises, ransomware, it's in your face every day. So boards are recognizing that it's on their agenda more and more these days. So I think for me, as much as you've got that, a business is going to be risk based. They're going to have to take that, and I think as a security leader, your job is to take those types of things, distill it down to what that means to your business, and what your business's risk appetite is, and then put your business case forward, and that's where your job comes into selling that to the board. But yeah, it's easier now than probably previously when you didn't have all these mainstream media type stories that are seen by people all day, every day.
Exactly. So another thing too with the UK, the look at cybersecurity is a little bit more in depth, I think, than the US, because US is more commercial and more money driven. And so a lot of those types of focuses as far as like security goes, there's no return on investment with security in most cases. So
that's a great point.
Yeah, so they don't want to spend money on that type of technology. They don't want to build up these huge teams because when they do that and there's no return on investment, the first thing the board says is, what are we getting out of this, and how exactly is this benefiting us financially? To be honest with you, unless they're breached, they don't really see the return.
Exactly. It's so intangible. It's like if you have the right security measures in place, then it's like you're good, you're not breached. But they don't see that as a benefit, right? They're just like, well, what are you guys doing? Until they get breached, and then they start to look at it from a different angle.
Yeah,
That's a challenge because being on the marketing side of it, we're always trying to encourage companies, especially small ones, right? I'm not talking about like the big, large ones that has this big, large cybersecurity budget, or regulated industries where it's a requirement. But, just your everyday small startup or something, like they also need to be protected. But they're so in the nuts and bolts of like just, getting out of the red, that it's hard for them to justify that security budget because it's so intangible. It's like, you don't want to invest in a home security until your house gets broken into. For a lot of people, it's just it comes down to the money. Like if I have to feed my family, I'm not gonna worry about an alarm system. I'll just lock the door and hope for the best.
Exactly.
yeah.
So Steve, what is your biggest fear at night? Let's say you go home. Well, obviously you're still home because of the pandemic. But let's say you're in the office and you go home at night. What keeps you up at night as being a management and leader?
I think it goes back to that FOGO that I mentioned. That fear of being on your watch that something happens. So that's something that I think keeps every security person awake. It's one of the main challenges that we've got, and why the industry can be so demanding and so challenging. So it's just having that thing happen on my watch. That's the top of mind thing, I think, for me.
Yeah. Doing the pen testing and public speaking and stuff like that, I found that, I kind of put myself in the target, in the crosshairs, when it comes to industry and people and, things that they want to be, but they don't have the opportunity. Speaking of which, we had that tonight. We had some guys from Anonymous that logged in, that were, pretty diehard Anonymous back then, and it became an issue. So we had to lock down the chat and kick people out because they came like to me, came after me, which I find it very interesting. But it is what it is. So yeah, like those types of things, like as a speaker and somebody who puts themselves out in the public to help people, you're always going to get that level of I guess exposure, vulnerability, and it's the same thing with any system or any company or people in general. We all have weaknesses, we all have vulnerabilities, and they'll go after them. So even after leaving a group like Anonymous, I still have that threat, that background chatter. But luckily, I have great staff for the Haunted Hacker, and they're able to take care of like issues with people like that. It's just really really strange that people would do that and try to disrupt something that's beneficial to everybody. Um, so, any questions for us, Steve? Like, I really appreciate you coming on. Like, it's been awesome. It's been a great
No, I've
conversation.
loved it. Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk to everyone. And again, for everyone joining and taking the time out of the day, I just still find that amazing that people want to come in and listen to me speak. Most people maybe just came for the rest of the show. So I think that's awesome. So thanks everybody for that. Really appreciate it. My question, I guess, really is. And I think you've answered this a few times before, but what's next for the podcast and for everything else? I know you've got a lot on yourself in terms of speaking, and you're doing some things with the UK law for the protection of children and things like that. So, what else is going on?
Man, it's crazy. So literally, this has been going on for 12 weeks, and it started over a glass of bourbon in our kitchen upstairs. And it became this thing where we thought, well, we'll just give it a shot and see what happens. My biggest fear was nobody was going to show up. So far, we haven't had that problem, and it's been amazing. I think the next step. So I brought Tremi on as the co-host because I figured, after 11 weeks of people hearing me, and sometimes my cynical attitude and more of the darker side of the internet, we needed something to kind of equal that out and make it digestible for everybody. And kind of our model was, I don't know if you know the Hack 5 Threatwire podcast with Darren Cutchins and his co-host. Like I realized that the industry I'm a big advocate for women in tech, right? So I'm always trying to open up the doors. I think my last two hires when I was in Houston were both females, because I want to give them a chance to equal the playing field and kind of add that they give another mindset to what we're doing in operations. Some things that I can't give. So I brought Trami on, and she's been fantastic. She actually did the logos, by the way, which I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, they are awesome. Yeah,
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 just
good
thanks.
job from me.
yeah,
I just started with the graphics. I was like, well, I'm creative. I can help with the graphics. And then it kind of exploded over the last 2 weeks. And now I feel like Mike and I have become close friends in such a short amount of time. And then just this community has been so awesome. Like all the guys that I've been able to connect with through this podcast is just, it's helped me like really dive into, the industry even more. So I was doing marketing for the company where we, just automate network penetration testing. So I was really big into the offensive side of it. And that was like my bubble. But meeting Mike, I slowly started opening up that bubble and just like kind of peeling through and just learning. And it's overwhelming, like Steve mentioned. It's a lot. I find myself on the phone a lot more than I used to be. But it's when you're just getting in, you feel like there's so much that you just need to catch up on. But it's been super exciting, and I'm loving every moment of it.
yeah, it's been pretty intense. I mean, we literally went from having like maybe 18 people log on for the live broadcast to now today, I think is our peak, actually with 34, minus the two people we had to kick out. But yeah, like it's really growing. And I feel like so Ryan is another co-host. He's actually in Australia, and we're gonna have a Haunted Hacker podcast just like this that's gonna air in Australia in their time zone. So, and I'm looking possibly to get one in the UK as well, where we have somebody in the UK actually host a podcast. And we host all the videos underneath the Haunted Hacker YouTube channel. Um, but I want to get into more of, the training and helping people learn what we do, even from a beginner level. I think that beginner level is really important. Um, I thought about doing the tech portion of the podcast, like really deep and showing like really advanced techniques, but I don't think that's the most important. I really think the most important is to show something a beginner can do and give them that excitement, because we
Yeah,
have various levels of people in the channel, and on the podcast. And my thing is giving back and bringing people into the industry. So that's why I focus on Wi-Fi hacking, the easy stuff, doing, remote shells with PowerShell, stuff that's digestible. And for some of them, I actually do like a document, like a walkthrough that they can download. I'll put it in the chat. They can download it and follow it step by step. So that to me is the most important. But I feel like this has become more of not really a podcast. It's become more of a community and a movement of, free knowledge and disclosure and just partnering with people and bringing people to where they can get that information to make them successful. Because I don't want to leave anybody behind. I didn't have a mentor when I got into security. I didn't have a channel that I could go to and be like, oh, well, that's really cool. Let me check into this. I did have one person that kind of took me under his wing way back in the day when I first got started. His name's Robert Hansen. He goes by Arsenic. Really awesome web hacker, like probably one of the best in the world. And he was part of White Hat Security with Jeremiah Grossman. So those two guys I met years ago in Vegas at a hacker conference. And just recently, I hooked up Trami and Robert so that she could meet my mentor. He's an amazing guy.
He has been asking me the most challenging questions, and I'm gonna ask you guys one of them because it had me thinking. But he said, which one would you rather, absolute security or absolute privacy? And it was such a tough one for me because in a perfect world, if you have absolute security, which means zero crime, right? It means everything has to be public. Everything you do, everything. Some organization or some controlling entity would have to know that so that they can police it, right? But if you have absolute privacy, then it opens up for bad things to happen. So You know, like where do you guys fall on in that spectrum?
I think that this question would be best for Steve to answer first. And this is why, is that geographically and politically, I think the answers are going to be completely different. So go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so I don't think there's. It's a super interesting question.
Exactly. I first met Robert, and that was what he asked me, and I was like, wow, I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with that, if I'm being honest, because yeah, like you say, there's pros and cons to both, and I think that's why we need to get some balance. It's never going to be perfect, you know. As you say, if everything is encrypted and secure and kind of protected, then how can some of our agencies do what they need to do? But you know, likewise, how do you stop overreach? How do you do those sorts of challenges? I honestly don't know what the best answer is with that one. I think for me, it's just having balance and make sure you've got the right approach depending on what the situation is. But yeah, it's a tough question. I like that one.
I like that you were in the middle, because my answer was like, well, absolute security for me. It's like, because I feel like if you're in a world where it's absolute security and everyone knows your stuff, it kind of forces humans to be better humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. I definitely think there needs to be that balance, for sure. But it was a tough question, and I don't know the answer, so that's why I was asking you guys.
I think if you look at what's happened recently with the kind of the changes in social media platforms, so WhatsApp changing the terms and conditions, and then suddenly Signal going through the roof to the point where it's fallen over. I think that gives you a good indication as to what a lot of people's view is on security or privacy. They don't want these companies looking at what they're doing. They don't want to be targeted on Facebook based on what they've said on these other platforms. So I think that whole shift that we saw recently, I've got Signal on there, and the amount of people that said, this person's just joined Signal, this person, it was just going boom, boom, boom.
Same.
It's a really good indication as to what people are taking their privacy a lot more seriously than they probably did before. It goes back to what I was saying before about this is more in the mainstream now. There were times when people didn't know what a hacker was, or ransomware, or malware, and you can ask most people in the street that watch mainstream media and news. They know what that is now because they see it every day. So people are making a lot more decisions based on that now. So yeah, cool question though.
So I'll answer it from an American point of view as well. So when the forefathers decided to found the country, and they basically made a statement, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin, I may be wrong, maybe Justin, but really said that, if you're willing to give up some privacy for security, then you deserve neither. And that's been kind of the founding principle. So after 9/11, the big problem was, government overreach. They used 9/11 as a way to say, hey, we can protect you. We'll give you that security, just relinquish some of your privacy. So we had the Patriot Act and things like that followed. So I don't think that one is better than the other, but this is the way I look at it with privacy and security. When I have a commercial ISP that I'm connected to, I don't expect them to provide me security. I'll do that myself, but I do expect them to provide me some privacy. Just because they're routers in my home doesn't mean that they can have, set that router up to where it automatically joins a hotspot and gives people connection to my Wi-Fi. So, I mean, there's different ways to look at it, but I think both are important. It just depends on where you're at and the type of government that's in control. And so far here in the US, we haven't seen a government in years that really respects privacy. I think probably since the 70s, maybe even before that. So yeah, it's a big issue. Let me look at the questions. I still have like a ton of questions coming in. Yeah, Steve's a hot topic. I'm really excited about this.
I think that awesome beard draws in the crowd.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Thank
At the
you.
same time,
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. My husband has a beard, and he's got like 16 different types of beard oils and
Yeah,
all
that's
this
it.
products.
let's see.
Well, I
Anyways,
do have a question for Steve, and this is more on the psychology mindset one. So I know Steve, you're heavily on the defensive side, but you're also an ethical hacker. So how do you go about changing your mindset from being defensive and then attacking? You know, because it's different, right? You're just two different types of like
Yeah,
personalities almost.
I think so, but as much as that can be the case, I think it's down to the person. When I approach something, you have both mindsets, because if you're attacking, then you need to be thinking, right, what's happening on the other end of the screen, what's happening on the other side of the screen. So you need to I'm going to run this command, I'm going to try this attack. What's that going to look like to the blue team on the other side? So you really need to switch between the two. And likewise, when you sat on the other side of the screen and you're blue, you're thinking, right, okay, what are these attacks going to look like? And therefore, what signals in my environment do I need to be looking for? So it's a constant. I don't know if it's one or the other. For me personally, at least, it's just one of the same. It's the mindset that you have to be able to kind of flip between the two.
When you're under like a lot of pressure, you know, on the job, which I'm sure you do on a daily basis, but you know, you just have that one day where it's just a mental beating. What do you do to kind of like calm yourself down so that you can see the problem or the solution a little bit more clearly? Because I know, like for me, I have high anxiety. So when I have a lot of stressors coming at me externally, I kind of just shut down and I need to just kind of zone everything out for like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And then I can kind of like go from there. So, you know, how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I guess in the here and the here and now, I would just step away from the computer, stick some music on, or like one of the benefits of working from home is obviously I've got my son, my son's next door and stuff. Can go and speak to them and just totally forget about it for a moment, clear my head, have a bit of family time, and then just come back into it. Which one of the massive advantages of the situation at the moment is that for me. But then, outside of that, I do a lot of things. I'm very big at saying, make sure you have something else that you can switch off from, and try and make that not tech. Like me, I stop from work and I come on and I do this stuff, but you also need my advice to have something else. So I run, I Thai box and kickbox. That's great for stress relief. Going and punching a bag or whatever it is. But yeah, definitely just go and have something else outside of your kind of being zoned into your computer. And that goes for anybody that's working from home. Doesn't necessarily mean cyber, but yeah, that's me. Go family time, kind of during the day, just have a quick decompress and come back with a fresh mind and attack it from a different angle. And then kind of longer term, just make sure you've got some sort of physical pastime that you can just go and get that stress gone with.
absolutely,
Yeah.
totally agree. With me, with getting overwhelmed, I do that to myself quite a bit. I pile on a lot of stuff, advisory board and stuff like that. And then next Tuesday, I'm speaking at two conferences: the Future of Cybersecurity in London with Frank Abagnale, and then I'm doing a private talk for Cyber Angel in the UK, the Intel company. Back to back, literally. I start at 9 a.m. and I go from 9 to 10:30, from 10:30 to 11:30 with Frank Abagnale and Brett Johnson. Um, it's just nonstop. And there's some days where I have to disconnect and be like, I can't do it. I need somebody else to help. But I think that's important, is knowing your limitations as well as, knowing yourself and your capabilities. So yeah, I mean, kickboxing, boxing, whatever. I think it is good because it's both physical and it's mental. So it distracts you for a while, takes you away from that I don't want to say reality, because a lot of what we do, I don't think exists in reality. I think that a lot of it's in the ether. Um, but that's my take on it. So Tramy, what do you do as far as like relieving that stress, or breaking away from the ether?
Yeah. Well, I am very family oriented, so I I'm really close with my brothers, my sister, my parents, my husband. So I make sure I spend a lot of time with family because I lost my father-in-law passed away 2 years ago, and he kind of passed away at a really young age and unexpectedly. And I think that really changed my perception of like reality, and it really made me realize what was important. And it's that human connection, right? So it's the people in your life that you care about, and it's just creating memories with them. So I love spending time with family. I also play tennis, so I just smack the shit out of that ball whenever I'm having a bad day. So yeah, that's kind of what I like to do. I also like music. That's a huge outlet for me. I've got a playlist for every single time of the day, the mood, what I'm doing. So yeah, music's a big one too.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I'll just get my headphones, stick those on, and just put some music on. The type of music depends on the
The
feeling, but
mood.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Sometimes it'll be like the type of music that was on today before. Sometimes it'll be a lot slower, or even just nature sounds, just to kind of bring yourself down, bounce a little bit. I know, Ryan, you've got some kind of meditation things as well, haven't you? There, so yeah, stuff like that. I think is awesome for that.
Yeah, I always start my day off meditating for at least 5 to 15 minutes. And I find that helps just to not have any thoughts and just try to be really like Zen.
Yeah.
That definitely has helped. But I'm not gonna lie, it's a stressful industry to be in for sure, because technology is just moving so fast. And you've got people like you mentioned that specialize, but for me, I feel like I kind of just need to know the general picture, and that gets really overwhelming for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Steve, we really appreciate it. And, you're welcome anytime on the podcast and Discord. We're fighting a Discord war right now as we speak. That's why I'm a little distracted. But yeah, anytime, man.
No, it's done.
It's done. Cool. Thank you. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's it's one of those things, it's like, people don't want people to succeed, and they don't want people to, have a good thing. They want to destroy stuff.
It's not about politics, man. It's about helping people, like
good vibes. Yeah, good vibes.
Yeah.
Look at these people in the room here. They're here to learn. They're here to share ideas. We've got no time for the bullshit of the past. Let's just learn and move forward. Like, how can we actually be a threat against threat actors if we can't even work together, man?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially when
I'm a dirty hippie, so
Me too. I'm very much a hippie. I'm like, world peace, guys. Can we just all get along, grow, be better humans?
So with that being said, we're gonna have to have a team meeting probably tomorrow and like orchestrate security levels on everything.
Yeah. I've invites are gone. It's done. We have to be a bit more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway. So another thing, Steve, like we started this group to be an open platform, right? So I opened up the Discord server to anybody, sent out invites to the world, and it really grew fast. But the problem is when you do that, there's always a bad apple somewhere that wants to tear things apart and make it uncomfortable for other people. So, anyways, you're welcome anytime. I hope that we cross paths with the London police, because I think that you would really like what we do. There's supposedly an intervention next month. Maybe you can get involved. And then the Matrix Challenge, the UK Matrix Challenge, award ceremonies next month as well. So I'm supposed to be speaking there, and maybe we can, do like a joint talk or whatever.
That sounds good.
Depending on your time frame, we'll see what happens. But again, thank you for coming on. You're welcome to stay for the rest of it. I'm just going to bring up a video and walk them through MSF Venom, creating a payload and encoding it with Shikata Ganai. So you're more than welcome to stay.
I'm going to hang around. I'll take my microphone and video off, go and grab a beer. If anybody wants to message me with any questions on the side, or hit me up on LinkedIn, always open to having chats and stuff like that. So yeah, and definitely still be around if anybody wants to chat. So thanks very much, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
cool.
thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. It was so great.
Thanks, everyone. Well done, Trammy. Awesome.
Yeah, no, you're awesome.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
All right.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, man.
So give me a second. You guys can talk amongst yourselves, you and Ryan, maybe Trammy. I'm going to set up the demo for Shikata.
Sounds good. So,
Hey, Trammy, what's happening?
Just living that good life.
Living the dream.
It
So
was
I've got a
funny.
question.
I was reading about Shikata Ganai, and trying to pronounce it properly, and understanding what it meant in Japanese culture, and it was really interesting. Then I find myself saying it with an anime kind of voice. I was I was like Shikata Ganai. I know, silly.
So the company that you work for, they're mainly red team stuff or red team emulation, yeah?
Yeah. So we focus on offensive security. And our founder was an ethical hacker for, over 10 years. And as you know, the worst part about being a hacker is the reporting part, right? You did the fun stuff. Now you got to write it up and package it in a way that, the C-suite and board directors can get it. And that piece of it took so much time that he was on this really large engagement, and he was dreading writing the report. So he decided to spend his time writing a tool to automate the report so that he wouldn't have to do it. Then that kind of blew up. And then now we have a platform that basically automates network penetration testing. And it's different from a vulnerability scan in that it does enumeration, exploitation, post-exploitation, like an actual hacker would. It's really exciting. We actually got domain access at 4 companies that ran the tool last year. So it was just really interesting to see an automated tool get domain access in an actual environment.
Yeah, I actually looked at the demo.
How do you that'd be good. I'd love to see a demo.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Are you ready to roll, Mike?
Yeah. I'll run through it really quick. So this is Shikata Ganai. I've set it up in a virtual machine. The video quality may increase a little bit, but we have to remember I'm running the podcast off of a cell phone because Nomad Internet Services really doesn't provide service. So I'll go ahead and get started. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Certainly can, buddy.
Okay, cool. Here we go. So let me mute that. So right now what we're doing, the IP config is on the IF config is on the right. And now I'm opening up MSF Venom. I'm choosing the platform x86 and Windows. And now we're determining the exe file that I'm going to inject the payload into, which is putty.exe, a really small application. And then again, we're looking at the payload that we want to add to it. So I added an interpreter payload, a reverse TCP.
So Putty's a SSH client,
yeah, multiple like SSH, FTP, all that stuff. Telnet. I'm setting L host, local host, which is that 1.234. So I type really slow in this because I don't want people to get lost. And then the local port, the port that the payload will point to, and the port that I will have listening for that payload, for that shell. And again, this is the encoder, which is x86 Shikata Ganai. And you'll see what happens after we get through. So iterations is 3 iterations, which seems to be the most effective. And then B is the null bytes. So that will go into the actual exe in payload. So the file will be in exe format, and the output will be the haunted putty.exe. So it will execute that.
Can you explain iterations briefly if you've got time?
So iterations is basically one iteration would be adding a null byte in a random spot, but with multiple iterations, like you can choose which level of iteration, right? So you see in the output, right? It's gone through, 3 iterations with different sizes. And you want to keep that size small. You don't want to go too high, because when you go too high, it's too noticeable. So now I'm running an MSF console to start my listener. Remember, we use the Windows reverse TCP interpreter payload. So I'll go ahead and choose the exploit, which is multi-handler for Windows. You can do the same thing with APKs as well. You'll just have to choose Android. And I'm setting my payload, which will be your Windows interpreter reverse TCP. And then we'll go through the host that you want to listen on, which will be the 234. And then immediately after, we'll do the local port, which will be the same as the payload, which is 444. And then now we'll exploit, right? So now we're going to set it to listen. So I have that machine listening on that port, waiting for someone to install that haunted putty. So I host it on a web server, on the same server. And there you see the hauntedputty.exe. Click on it. Do you want to run this file? Yes. Publisher cannot be verified? Yes. So you see it still brings up putty, but then it also gives me access to that system in the background. And there's a number of tools that you can use and different types of data that you can grab. So that's like that's the short and rough of Shikata and MS Venom and Metasploit. Pretty common tools. But remember, like there's like the more iterations that you use, the better off that you are, as long as you don't get that bite size too high. There's also levels of encryption you can add to the payload. I'm not going to go into that because that will probably lose a lot of people. But there's a way to protect yourself and that payload from like really, being identified and caught by AV.
Yeah.
So
Mike, can you explain what the iterations are for? What the purpose of doing the multiple iterations is about?
Yeah, sure. So with the payload, you're looking at putting a null byte into the actual exe, right? To help obfuscate what is actually going on with the payload. So when you do that, when you put that null byte in there, it's hard for a system to like identify it as, oh, hey, wait, this is not the legit exe file that we're waiting for. This doesn't match. So with that null byte, it kind of helps get past that control. And Cherami and I talked last night, and she's absolutely correct. Like MSF Venom and with Shikata, if you use it out of the box, yeah, like it's really detectable with AV and some of the like IDS monitors, whatever, and Windows Defender. But if you use other tools on top of it and manipulate kind of the payload a little bit and look at the actual shellcode, you can get it past AV. It's just a matter of being able to know the tools used. And that's not the only encoder. So there's multiple encoders that you can use. I think that one of them is called Shelter. I messed around with Shelter a little bit. I'm not a big fan of Shelter because it uses Wine on Kali. And anytime you use Wine, which is a Windows emulator, it's very shaky and kind of flaky. And I've had some problems with it. Yeah. So I like command line. I don't like to use Wine. I don't like to look at outside resources. I just want access to the payload, be able to manipulate it and wrap it up into the exe file. And like we saw with the PowerShell, like the Mr. Robot hack that I did with the USB and remotely sending credentials through Mimikatz through that shell. Yeah. It's completely undetectable. And the reason being is because you're using normal behaviors, right? You're masking that traffic in port 80 traffic, and it's a multi-stage attack, right? So you go out, the attack goes out and says, hey, look, I need to go to this IP address, get this PowerShell script and execute it. And PowerShell already is elevated with privileges. So the system's like, oh, hey, this is cool. And when the shell pops and it goes over port 80, the traffic isn't stopped because Windows is like, oh, it's just port 80 and port 80 traffic, and we don't really see any threat in it. So it's successful. And then you can also use 443 and actually encrypt the traffic, which makes it even more difficult for analysts or monitoring systems to actually pick it up. But again, like that's more. Go ahead.
So from a blue team perspective, how would we detect this attack?
Okay, so
I was just about to ask that. That's a great question, Ryan.
Yeah. So are we talking about the EXE or are we talking about the PowerShell attack? Which one?
Let's start with the EXE.
Okay. So EXE, I mean, with that attack right there that I did, it'll probably be stopped basically because of the fact that, I didn't use encryption on top of it. I just ran it as is and still maintain the file integrity of the putty.
So what's the AV picking up? What's the AV picking up to stop that?
AV is picking up not only the hash of the original file, and what it should be, but it's also picking up the way it interacts with the system. So with those two things combined, it'll probably get stopped. But with the PowerShell, every Windows system has PowerShell embedded now. And it's kind of an elevated privilege, and you can get access to PowerShell and run things as admin. And so the Windows system doesn't look at that as potentially a threat. So I sat with an AI company. I won't name shame, but I talked to them about how their platform didn't pick up my USB attack with reverse PowerShell over common ports, and they said, well, it's not going to alert it because, first of all, PowerShell's it's authorized and that's normal behavior, and port 80 is pretty common, and so we don't the platform doesn't see that as potentially bad behavior. So I went into the data, right? They have, I don't want to give away the company, but there's a section within the platform that you can look at the raw data from the activity or whatever. And I was able to see the PowerShell being executed, was able to see the shell going out through port 80. My question was, so why is that not alert? Why is that not something that it flags? And their answer was, we need to go back to the drawing board and look at the payload and build this into the system. Because you can use a combination of normal behaviors in a system for completely malicious purposes. And again, that's that red team mindset. And you have to look at what's acceptable on a network and then go after those behaviors and manipulate those behaviors to get what you want into the network or into that system. And
So
that's
from
why,
go
ahead.
So from a blue team perspective, if I'm making a rule to detect this, is it about chaining those behaviors together to not get a false positive? Is that how I detect your attack, or
to be honest with you, yeah. So to be honest with you, if I was going to stop that attack, I would look at the timestamps first of all, because the time that it takes to run that exe or to run that PowerShell, and then followed up immediately by traffic on port 80 or port 443, that to me says, okay, something's going out of the network. I'm not really sure what it is, if it's encrypted, but we just had a PowerShell open on that system. So there's something going on with that system. So I would look at the timing and look at the behaviors. So if you can match those two up and you can correlate the two, you can stop that action. But the problem is,
so could that be worked around with a little bit of a cheeky scripting and a bit of a delay on when? Yeah.
So you can absolutely create a delay. But, and that, again, when you're looking at AI systems, a lot of people are putting those systems in because they either have limited bandwidth as far as employees and resources go. So they're kind of sitting back, looking at the monitor, waiting for things to happen. But it happens so quickly that by the time they see or are able to correlate that hidden data, it's too late.
Gone.
So I think that's where, and I hate to bash on AI and machine learning, but I think that's the downfall. And I think if we depend on machines to think for us, we're going to have some major problems. So, any other questions?
All right. Should we open the chat up now? I think it's
Is it safe? I've been speaking publicly for 3 years.
Actually, I got a question for Tremi, actually. So Tremi, you're in red teaming. How do you, so you say you've got iPad for the win. Say you've got a client who's not so well versed in the whole red team, blue team thing. How do you explain to them the scope of an engagement? Like, how do you get them to make it clear to you?
So what I do is I bring in our founder, Alton, who is an ethical hacker and knows his shit.
Yes, he is.
That's right. Alton Johnson is our founder and he is awesome. He's actually, I feel so fortunate, right? Because I never would have gotten into cybersecurity if it wasn't for my brother, who's really good friends with him. And I was able to bring my creative skills to kind of help him grow his company, the brand and the image. But with that being said, it's a huge learning curve for me. So I deflect on him a lot to help me with these things. But for the most part, I'm on a lot of these scoping calls just to understand the customer's pain points from a marketing perspective so that we can kind of help educate. And to be honest, I started out my career loving marketing and then hating it because of digital media, right? Like the internet happened and then my job got exponentially more challenging because now I have to fight through all this noise. So I almost had this distaste for marketing and I thought about switching careers until I landed in cybersecurity. And I was like, finally it's an industry that I can use my creative like skills to just educate and like do something good and like just kind of help these companies protect themselves against these cyber criminals that are out there. It's like the mafia behind a computer screen.
Very true.
So yeah, so I count on the hackers on our team a lot with the scoping calls. And they do a really good job explaining to the client like what it is they're trying to do. Again, defining that scope and then explaining the methodology. A lot of things that they'll ask is how disruptive is a pen test? That's always the biggest concern. Like, should I be worried? Are you going to bring anything down? Especially like call centers that are 24/7. So it's just educating them on that and coming up with like the best way to approach that penetration test that works for them.
And so does your company, does it use the MITRE ATT&CK framework in that it finds out what kind of company it is and then molds that threat emulation to the kind of company they are? Like, is this what your company, like a service your company provides, or actually something they have to come to you with?
Yeah, so so it's an automated pen testing platform, but we recently integrated the MITRE ATT&CK. Well, we're working on it right now, so it's still in beta.
Hello.
But
sorry,
I was like, hello.
No, it was Siri just wanted to say hello for a second. So,
Nice, hello, Siri. See, Apple's always listening.
Oh, Alexa too. Yeah.
Alexa too.
Absolutely. The unicorn.
Yep, exactly.
All right, I just wanted to thank Dave for coming in tonight, man. It was really good to hear your perspective, dude. Like, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, mate.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
no worries.
It's back.
Thanks
Oh,
very
nice
much.
hoodie, bro. Nice hoodie.
Oh, he's ready to hack.
I'm cold. It's cold here. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. And then again, thank you for everyone taking up the time to join. It's really appreciated. So good stuff.
Yeah, anytime, man. And I look forward to having you in a Discord and sharing ideas. And I think we have some really good conversations on the Discord server about, different topics. I'm really happy with the way things turned out as far as, the talk and the interview and whatnot. And Trammy has been absolutely amazing as far as a co-host. Like, I told you you could do it.
No,
too easy.
No, so when Mike asked me, when Mike asked me, I was like, Mike, do you know any other female, like any other female?
Yeah, she didn't want to do it, but I had talked to Robert, and Robert was like, "Yeah, she's good to go." So
thanks
hey, Mike, can we unmute Che? Unmute Che, buddy. He's got a question. Che,
Chi. Where is that?
I've got it all over it. I still unmute. Laughing.
But yeah, I'm having so much fun tonight. So I have to thank you guys for sure. Like I feel the positive energy. You guys are just awesome. I love it.
Thank you so much for the Haunted Hacker Down Under logo, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think Chi wanted to speak really quick. Chi, do you have a question?
No, I didn't. I just gave a round of applause for the trainee.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
oh, thank you. I'll give it back to you guys.
Yeah. So
I'm so bad with compliments.
Next week is going to be Chi and Alberto Daniel Hill from Darknet Diaries, and he has a really good story to tell. So everybody that's tuned in this week, tune in next week because it'll be really good. So I just really enjoyed doing this and giving back and bringing people to, the public and helping spread knowledge and inside information as far as you can do this as well. And it's not hard. It's just a matter of commitment and passion, really, and sharing information.
So can I just say next week, it's going to be, make sure you respond to the Eventbrite thing. It's going to be invite only next week. So
Yep. From here on
going to be
out,
locked down a
yeah.
little tighter.
Yeah, from here on out, we have to be on lockdown. We haven't had this issue our entire length of the Haunted Hacker podcast until tonight, and it's been. I mean, I really appreciate the patience of everybody, Steve, the guest, and all the people listening, dealing with the chaos and the flamer wars that are going on behind the scenes. You guys don't actually see it, but it's been pretty hectic for all the hosts and co-hosts tonight. Yeah, Brian's phone's been blowing up. So, yeah, we'll have it locked down a little bit more next week, and we won't have to worry about all the intrusions and nonsense. But yeah, thanks guys for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Any last words from anybody before I cut this off?
I'll see you at the next Trace Labs event. Let's do this.
Yeah.
All right, you guys have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, everyone.